How can you win this kind of endgame where white has a rook pawn and bishop against a king and pawn? Okay, so before we solve and analyze the chess endgame puzzle, let's talk about the rook pawn and the bishop. This kind of endgame is considered draw if the bishop is opposite color of the corner of the board. Since this is a dark square bishop and the corner of the board is light square, there is no way for white to check or even checkmate the black king in the corner. If we will continue this one, of course, king and then move here. Once the pawn moves, there is no way for white to force the black king to move away from the light square corner. So this is theoretically and principle draw. So let's go back to our main puzzle. Okay, so let's analyze and solve this one. White to move and win. It's very critical for white, especially for the white king, not to land in the wrong square. For example, king will land to king c5. There's a b6. The target of black, the black king, is to land on a8 or here b7 light square because the bishop cannot check obviously the black king in any light square. That's very obvious. So after b6, if you'll capture that one, king will just b7 and the safe haven is the a8. So that is theoretically draw. If you will capture that using the pawn, king b7, king b5 opposition, and after off, king a8, king cannot go a6 or c6. That's stalemate. If white will sacrifice the bishop, king will just capture that one. And this is the ideal position of endgame where black can force a draw. How? Let's say king a6 or king c6, regardless, black will just oppose the white king. Oppose. If push pawn, stalemate. So that is very basic endgame. Let's go back to original position. So moving king c5 will be met by this b6 move. How about king c4? Same thing though. b5 check. And after king captures, of course, king b7, once again, the king will reach the a8, which is the good and very safe position for the black king to draw the game. Let's go back. So king c4, king c5, both of the squares are bad squares for white king. King to d4, waiting the pawn to move before landing to any of the squares. All right, so if king c6, let's go by moving the king first. Bishop b6, blocking the pathway of course, the b7. And this king will go around attacking the b7 pawn. If black will try to go here, of course, opposition, that is very clear that the king can no longer protect the pawn b7. So let's go back. So after king d4, king c6, bishop b6, how about opposing the white king? Then king c4, move here, king b4, let's king d6, king b5, king d5 opposed, bishop c7. Now the black king cannot go to d6, king e6, and king b6, king b6, king d7, king takes, and the pawn is unstoppable. Let's go back. After king d4, now moving the king won't change any. White can find a way to obviously attack the b7 because let's say king d6, you can immediately go here, king c4, different story, king c6, and then bishop b6. This is the position we had earlier. Now, after king d4, let's try moving b6. Then later on, let's try b5. You will not capture the pawn using the bishop or the pawn because that's draw. You only have to do a6. This is the very critical push pawn, the a6 pawn. If b5, of course, king c5 attacking the pawn. If b4, king will capture. King c6, king c4 oppose. If king c7 oppose. If king move here, now king b6, the black king cannot oppose because of the bishop and will force to move away. Of course, you all have to do is to go b7, and that's a pretty clear win for white. Now, king d4, let's try moving immediate b5 here. A6, once again, don't forget the A6 once the black pawn moves. Because if you, for example, move here, the black king can now go to B7 to A8. Sorry, draw for white. So let's go back. King D4, B5, A6. If King D6 opposition, King C3, this time white is kind of forced a little bit. Of course, the black cannot go to C5 to oppose the black king. Let's try King C6 and then King B4. If King to C7, King takes B5, move here, King B6. Once again, black is always forced to move away because of the bishop and the pawn. It's both pieces are guarding the B8 and the B7. So this kind of position is draw as long you land in the correct square, and the A5 A6 is very critical before you decide to move the king.